Hello everyone. So I just want to say a couple of things really, and I'm sure there's a lot more to say about them, but a couple of things about the mace. Okay, so this type is a flanged mace that actually has its roots quite early in the sort of 11th, 12th century in more simple forms with a metal head and a wooden shaft. Then there were, later on, so-called Morgenstern or Morningstar style maces with an iron head and spikes in. What's interesting to note about these maces is that they're often not anywhere near as heavy as people assume they are. For example, this one's modelled on an example in the British Museum that I took the measurements of actually for this replica, and the shaft, for example, is hollow, and this is quite typical of weapons you find, original European weapons you find with metal shafts. Incidentally, it's exactly the case also with Indo-Persian warhammers and maces and axes. They usually have a hollow shaft as well. Because at the end of the day, whilst this is a bludgeoning, striking instrument, you want it to be manageable and fairly quick. Okay, you don't want it to be too cumbersome and too heavy. The purpose, of course, of making a wooden shaft is it's more durable than, a metal shaft is more durable than a wooden shaft. A couple of things I want to point out about the mace really is that in modern perception it's often used on foot, whereas historically it seems that by and large they were horsemen's weapons, even though they're very short. But of course what they're for primarily is hitting people in armour. Okay? So an important thing to state about the mace is that hitting someone who's unarmoured, you're going to do a lot less damage to them. I mean, okay, if you hit them in the head and kill them, you can't really do much more damage to someone than killing them. But generally speaking, it's probably harder to kill someone with one of these than it is actually with a sword. Okay? Firstly, it's a lot shorter, so you need to get closer. Secondly, it's just not as quick and nimble as a sword is, it's not as well balanced. But also, you're hitting them with spikes or a big blunt heavy end, so it's going to do impact damage. Whereas blades sever things, open up arteries, person's more likely to die quickly from blood loss or just removing a large part of their body than a bludgeoning instrument is. That, interestingly, the fact that these were often less lethal than swords actually leads to another interesting aspect of their use in the medieval world, and that is when you see, and there's not many examples, but when you see pictures in medieval art of law enforcers, sort of what were known as aldermen in England, they were employed by the mayor and they were the equivalent of police force. They're often equipped with a mace. And that's not because the mace is totally awesome, it's because the mace is less likely to kill a miscreant than a sword is. Okay? So it was seen, it's basically a predecessor of the modern truncheon or baton. But obviously for a world where people had more serious hand-to-hand weaponry than they do in the modern world, for the most part. So there you go. On one hand, it's very effective against certain types of armour, especially mail armour, because of course you injure the person through the armour rather than, underneath the armour, rather than having to breach or break the armour per se. So it's effective against armour, but it's also effective as a non-lethal weapon, a sort of stun weapon. But in an unarmoured environment fighting on foot, it's actually not a very effective weapon. The sword is more effective. And some of the same topics from my cutlass versus boarding axe video would stand for this weapon as well. But they're interesting things, and the reason why this has a ring sliding up and down it is because that's to hang from a thong or on the saddle of the horse, so it's ready there to fight another armoured man on horseback. So there you go, there's a few things about maces. I'm sure I'll say some more about them at some point. Thank you.